On today's show, we are going to be discussing 5 players that the Mavericks could potentially trade before the start of the 25-26 NBA season. Welcome into Mavericks Today by Chat Sports. I'm Jeffrey Cooperstein, and we do have the potential for the Mavericks to make a trade because they are over the roster limit right now with 16 guaranteed standard contracts here at the moment. And of course, going into the season, you have to be at 15. So the Mavericks have to make a move. It's just a matter of what move they make. So call your shot for me. Get today's show started. Will the Mavericks make a trade before the season begins? Type Y for yes, type N for no. Let me know down there in the comment section, and I'm going to give you 5 guys who I think could be on the move. We'll start with Caleb Martin, who the Mavericks acquired at last year's trade deadline. Martin was traded from the Sixers to the Mavs in exchange for Quentin Grimes and the 35th overall pick in the 2025 NBA draft that turned into Janai Broom. So you can look at it as Quentin Grimes and Janai Broom for Caleb Martin. And right now, it really is hard to envision Martin's role on this team. Like, we've showed you the wing depth on this team, and we've showed you just how many options that Jason Kidd is going to have here in this rotation. And look, it's quite a lot, and I really don't know if the minutes are going to find Caleb Martin, because you already have Cooper Flagg, who's going to play 30-plus minutes. You have PJ Washington, who's going to play 30-plus. Najee Marshall, is going to give you 20 to 25 minutes a night. So where do the minutes come for Caleb Martin? I'm not sure. Now, of course, there are injuries and there are unforeseen circumstances that could thrust him into the lineup. But as of right now, I don't know if Caleb Martin has a role on this squad. And this isn't even factoring in Klay Thompson, who's going to play a decent amount at the 3 as well. So if they were able to find some sort of value for Caleb Martin, who has a decent amount of money left on his contract, I think he would be someone I would consider moving. But Nico Harrison values Caleb Martin as a versatile wing defender, so it's unlikely that he gets moved. Jaden Hardy is a guy who I think is much more likely to be traded before the start of the season. And look, it just hasn't worked out for Hardy so far in his career with the Mavericks over 3 seasons. He's sort of been the same player that we've seen, look, averaging 8, 7, and 8, basically, shot about the same from 3 and about the same from the field. It's just been a little disappointing for Hardy, who the Mavericks traded up for in the 2022, it's right on my screen, I'm an idiot, 2022 NBA draft with the 37th overall pick. And I think the Mavericks expected Hardy to really blossom in to a true 6-man role where he was going to be able to play 25 to 30 minutes a night and score 14, 15 points and be an elite 6-man, which is something that simply just hasn't panned out for him. He forewent college, if you will, and went to the G League Ignite. It just did not work out for him. The Mavericks took a chance on him, which, you know what, is fine. I like taking shots on guys who have super high potential, but Jaden Hardy just hasn't worked out so far. There's not a role in the rotation for him this year either, so it wouldn't shock me if the Mavericks moved on from him. It also would not shock me if the Mavericks moved on from Olivier-Maxence Prosper, who, after 2 seasons, who's dealt with a lot of injuries, really just hasn't found his footing here in Dallas. And it's been a little unfair for Omax because the Mavericks have been in a win-now scenario and just really didn't have the time to properly develop Omax. And he's played in just 92 games, all garbage time as well. Had the wrist surgery last year that kept him out of the latter part of the season. So the Mavericks and Omax have just been on different timelines, if you will, as Omax is more of a developmental player who's going to take some time to really get into his own in the league, whereas the Mavericks are playing guys they know that can help them win today. Because right now, given the Mavericks' current roster construction with Kyrie, AD, Klay Thompson, and all the vets they have on there, they really don't have time to see the development and let Omax fail. If he fails, they got to replace him with someone who can do the job. And so that's kind of why I think that Hardy and Prosper are the most likely guys to be moved prior to the start of the season. They're just guys who don't fit the timeline of the Dallas Mavericks right now. Yeah, they're still young and they still have the ability to become good players in this league. But at the moment, the Mavericks are looking for guys who can help them win right now. And with the 16 guys on the roster, it's going to be one of these guys that the Mavericks trade in order to get to 15. All right, get rid of one for me. If you had to pick one for the Mavericks to trade, who would it be? Type H for Hardy or type P for Olivier-Maxence Prosper. Let me know down there in the comment section who Nico Harrison should move on from. A guy with a little more value than the other three that we've talked about so far is Max Christie. Now, I wouldn't trade Max Christie if I was Nico Harrison and I was running basketball ops for the Dallas Mavericks, but he does hold a decent amount of value because he is young and because he has shown flashes of elite potential in this league. First 7 games with the Mavericks after the trade, he averaged over 17 points and shot 47% from three, over 50% from the field. This, of course, was his best stretch of basketball of his entire career after being a second-round pick of the Los Angeles Lakers. And he's in it's either the first or the second year of his deal, making about $8 million per season. So he's under contract. He's a young player with potential on both ends of the floor. So he just has different trade value than the other three. And if the Mavericks were looking to actually get a prospect or a decent draft pick back in exchange, then maybe Max Christie would be a guy that they move. I think Christie is going to find his way into the rotation this season just because I believe in his potential and I believe in his two-way ability, which is what the Mavs are looking for on both ends of the floor. I think he can handle the ball a little bit as well, and he may be tasked with doing some of that. So I think Christie, if he's not moved, which I would say is unlikely, he could be someone that the Mavericks rely on heavily throughout the season. But he does have probably the most trade value of anyone on the Mavericks given his contract and given his status in the NBA. And the last guy we're going to talk about today is PJ Washington. And I know what you're thinking. It's like Washington going into the final year of his contract. And we talked on yesterday's show about the Mavericks extending PJ Washington. And I still think that is in the cards. But if they don't extend him, I think Washington is an absolute trade candidate because you don't want to let him walk for nothing. He's been here a season and a half. He's heading into the final year of his contract. And look, I think this only really happens if no extension is reached by him and the Mavericks, just because they don't want to let him walk and lose him for nothing in 2026 NBA free agency. It just wouldn't be a good asset management plan from the Mavericks front office to allow PJ Washington to walk for free. So it's either they get the extension done prior to the season or they trade him. And I think those are kind of the only two options out there because you just maybe they end up moving on from one of these guys before the season just to get to the roster limit. And then they move on from PJ Washington again at the trade deadline. So it's possible that a trade could happen in season with PJ. But I will say this, if they want to get a player in return that more fits their timeline and fits where everyone lies within their contract structures, I do think that PJ could be an option to trade just because of the value he would bring to another team. Now, like I said, I do think the Mavericks and Washington want to get a deal done. There is mutual interest in them continuing their partnership. So I don't think that an extension is off the table by any means, but watch out for a potential PJ trade if an extension does not get done. Again, I think that is unlikely. All right, so we've talked about 5 players here on today's show. I want you guys to pick one to trade from these 5. Caleb Martin, Jaden Hardy, Max Christie, PJ Washington. Type 1 through 5 down there in the comment section and let me know who you want the Mavericks to trade this offseason in order to get down to that roster limit. That will do it for today's show, guys. Appreciate you for tuning in to Mavericks Today by Chat Sports. And of course, if there wasn't a name that I mentioned on the Mavericks roster you think should be traded, drop that down in the comments as well and let me know your reasoning. Look, we're on the last day of July, then we have August, and then basketball finally returns. It's closer than you might think. We're about 7 weeks away from Mavericks training camp, and I can't wait for Mavs basketball, man. So stay locked in with us. The offseason almost over, and then we're going to have some real basketball to talk about.